Welcome to Philosophy All Along. So, I want to talk with you about my wildest, weirdest theory for Agatha All Along. As I've mentioned before, I absolutely love the show. I think it's one of the best things that's come out of the MCU. I think it's definitely one of the best things that has come out of Marvel television. And the show does so many fabulous things. But what I want to focus on just for today is kind of asking ourselves, well, what does some of this maybe imply? What is a little unsaid in the show that might be really interesting, but that also doesn't necessarily serve us? So I think that a lot of people, when we watch a thing, we tend to kind of look for how does this thing speak in a way that I find moving personally. And I think that that's valuable and fun. But sometimes it's also interesting to see how how does it say something that maybe is critical. And so I want to start with this. Um, there is set from the beginning, before this show even existed, what I would view as a kind of viewing rule for Agatha All Along, which is the people that you think are acting as they are probably actually doing the opposite. So, what do I mean by that? When I watched WandaVision, I was surprised, I was caught off guard when Agatha was being brought to be basically executed, and it looked like a witch trial. Knowing that Agatha's a witch, my expectation, of course, had been that the people who were bringing her to trial, to execution, um, were going to be not other witches, right? That they were going to be people who were like, "You're a witch. We're going to burn you for being a witch." That made sense to me because that's the way that history has recorded it. And so, what uh, WandaVision did is it turned that on its head, right? Oh, you think that this is going to be the non witch population that is trying to burn her at the stake? Well, no, actually, the people who are indicting her, the people who are tormenting her, the people who are potentially unfairly accusing her are actually other witches. So there's kind of this rule in the that's already been set by that action of the people that you think are doing the thing probably aren't, and it's actually you. It's actually coming from the inside, right? So you're thinking it's the people outside of the witch world who are doing this. No, it's actually the people inside of the witch world who are doing this. And so what it does is it removed at that moment, it removed the difference between the people who would accuse witches and kill witches who were not part of their society. It removes that and then shifts it to going, how are they any different from the witches who on the inside are willing to do the same thing? And you realize there is no difference. That if you are in fact a someone who is persecuting witches from the outside, right? That seems to be something that we recognize. Wow, that's a bad thing, right? The Salem witch trials. This is a bad thing. This was, it was murder, and but what WandaVision did as soon as it showed witches doing it to other witches said it's not always coming from the outside, it can come from the inside, right? And so these people doing this are potentially just as bad as the people who are doing it from the outside. So we will come back to why that's important in a minute. But keep in the back of your head the idea that, okay, the show has kind of as a founding premise from before it even existed, the idea that the people who we would think are insulated from guilt by being on the inside of a thing are potentially just as guilty as the people on the outside who are doing some sort of harm. So, what do I think is the wildest theory about the show? I think the wildest theory about the show is the idea that Rio is in fact Nicholas's mother, right? So we have Nicholas Scratch, who is this mystery through the show and is a character in Marvel who could have a lot of different ways of being instantiated. And so Nicholas is eventually kind of revealed to us. And what's never really clear is, okay, well, how did he come into being? All we know for sure is, at least according to Agatha, is that he was not created through any spell or incantation, right? She says that, right? That so there is this biological kind of fact about him insofar as, okay, this seems to be a biological baby as opposed to a baby created through a magical means. But we also know that Agatha, as we look around her, doesn't seem to have a male to help in this process, right? Um, Now, this person could have existed and then been killed, or maybe she just used someone, so on and so forth. But that doesn't track super well with the fact that she's very clearly presented as gay, right? So Agatha has a relationship with another woman. We don't have reason to believe that that she's a bisexual person, right? That she's having relationships with um, men and women. So, what do we know? What's shown to us in the show is okay, here you have a gay woman who has a significant amount of power, but she has not used that power to create her child, right? She tells us that. We have no reason to believe that some male would be able to force this to happen, right? Because she's a very powerful witch. So, what seems to be the best answer? By my lights, the best answer is that this is a child of love. It's not a child of magic, as we're told. So, the child was created in some sort of biological way. And the only answer that I have then is, what if it's Rio, who acts very much like a mother as well? Rio is sympathetic. She's sympathetic to Agatha's experiences and pain. She's there at the birthing of the child. Um, Agatha's not super happy to see her there, but I think that that's true of for many women giving birth, right? They're not necessarily happy to see the person who has helped cause this to happen. And in her particular case, she also has good reason to worry, like, oh, this is death. Is death coming for my son? But if that is the case, that doesn't remove the possibility that Rio is the mother, because what another parent might want is custody of their child. So Rio coming by isn't just an indicator, oh, the child will die. This also could be like, well, okay, this is my kid too. I would like my kid. But the problem is the the literalized metaphor is that it's death taking the child. So she seems very sympathetic to Agatha, provides Agatha with more time with the child, but then eventually it's time for Nicholas to go with her other mother. And I think, as been pointed out, I think very smartly by my own spouse, was that Agatha is asleep and Rio, when she comes to get Nicholas, does so in a very gentle way, but also reminds Nicholas to go back and kiss his mother goodbye, just the way a parent would for the other parent. Like, okay, okay, it's time for you to come with me. Okay, did you give your mother a hug? Come on, all right, now, all right, let's get going. And so to me, it reads very parental in that moment. So if we kind of just tick down the line of, okay, there isn't a father, there isn't an incantation. The implication generally is that a child who isn't brought into the world through magical means and is brought through some sort of biological means is not going to be a clone, right? That the child is generally, children are brought into the world by two people in some form or fashion, and if you did it by yourself, they would just be a clone. So this is a different person with different thoughts, different feelings, is biologically different from Agatha. Where did the kid come from if he's not incantated into the world? And I say Rio. Rio acts like a mother. She takes custody of the child, and that none of that is easy on Agatha. There is further reads of this that make some sense that I think are a little bit more interpretive. Like, for example, the fact that Rio recognizes the fact that she really did something to harm someone that she loves very much, taking the child. We haven't considered the possibility that parents do that when they also recognize the fact that the child is not necessarily in the best place with the other parent. Agatha has gone around using her child to kill other witches, despite the fact that the child doesn't seem to have the same inclinations that his mother does, right? The child, Nicholas, does not seem inclined to do harm and isn't as comfortable doing harm as Agatha is. And sure, maybe Agatha's doing it for this reason or that reason. She's doing it to protect her son. Some people think that she's doing it to try to appease Rio. But I think there's another read of it, which is that it's also possible that Rio is seeing this and not super content with how unhappy it's making her son. And so she takes custody, right? A custody that she was supposed to have years before, and she had only been granting kind of out of kindness. Agatha is not, by my lights, this unselfish parent. And I'm not here to do like mom shaming. There is something to be said for when you are using your son as the means by which to drop other people's guards. Like, oh, look at my innocent kid. You don't need to defend yourself from us. And then, okay, let me go murder all of you. There probably has to be a line where we're willing to be a little bit critical without it being kind of like, oh, well, I just think I'm a better parent than you, right? Like there's probably a point where you're using your kid to murder other people. You're using your child to kind of disarm other people. And your child isn't super comfortable doing that, where maybe the other parent goes, I'm not sure it's in Nicholas's best interest to stay with you. So anyways, that's a bit more of an interpretive read. But I do think that we can argue without it being much of a stretch. There's a very real possibility that the show is gesturing towards the possibility that Rio is the mother. Okay, so why does this matter? I think that this can have a very powerful interpretive uh, result. And that result is simply this. If we go back to what we had first discussed, right, that the show kind of reflects on people being in the inside who are actually doing the role of what you would usually view as like kind of a violent outsider, that the people on the inside are people that we can be critical of. Like just because they're a member of the witch community doesn't mean that they are not potentially also guilty of murdering witches, right? So if we go back to that and we look at the fact that Agatha was being killed by her people, right? That she was um, being tried and convicted and murdered by them. And we still don't know exactly why. Like, my assumption when I first saw WandaVision is, oh, because they know that she was using the Darkhold. And so that's why. But she's not. And then what's my evidence? Well, if you look at her hands, she doesn't have the blackened fingertips that suggest that she, in fact, is actually using the Darkhold yet. And they don't say that, but it's confusing to me because it might be like, oh, well, they're just killing her because she has this kind of succubus power. But if they know that she has this power to take power from other witches, why would they try and execute her by blasting her, right? That doesn't make sense to me. Now, it could just be like, oh, they didn't realize she had that much power and that she would be able to take all of their power. But what they say to her seems to imply that she's engaging in some sort of dark art. So she's doing things that she's not supposed to do, like engaging in knowledges and engaging in magics that she's not supposed to. And it's pretty clear that she's not wholly innocent. And this is something where like other people disagree, like, well, no, she's just this innocent victim. But if you watch her face, because she's kind of going, no, no, please don't. I don't want to. It's not, so on and so forth. But then like her mom's like, no, really, we know you are. And you watch her just kind of do that little smile that she does. You realize, oh, wow, she knows that there's something that she's doing that they don't approve of. Now, whether or not that thing is actually evil, I think is up for question. Because what I want to figure out is what is it that she's doing that warrants her family being willing to witch trial her and murder her. Now, one read could simply be, oh, well, she has this innate power and they've decided to try and kill her for it. I'm not convinced because that kind of doesn't make sense because it puts them in danger too in that regard. Like, why would you know that someone has that power and then try and kill them in that way, knowing that it could kill you? That doesn't quite track. But even if that is correct, even if that is the reason why, like they know that she has that power and that's why they're doing this, it's still going to fit into the reading that I want to share with you, which is simply this. What if the reason why they are trying to kill her is because of her relationship with death? What if the dark thing that she's doing that she's not supposed to be doing, right? That they're like, you're engaging in this something, is she's engaging in an illicit relationship that she's not supposed to have with literal death, right? That would explain so much, right? She's having this kind of secret affair. How do people respond to affairs where like you're not supposed to do this, like especially like kind of think back in the day, like someone's running away with someone that they're not supposed to run away with, and so this could possibly be seen as a betrayal of your community. Like, oh, we're the Hatfields, you're having an affair with a McCoy, right? Like that kind of idea. Okay, so the reason why I really like this particular reading, that the reason why they're doing this is because of her illicit relationship with death, is, well, look at how neatly it kind of tracks. Okay, so she's running away, right? She's had this relationship, but guess what? She's pregnant, right? So she's there giving birth. The other parent shows up. Oh, you're part of the problem. You're part of the reason why I'm in this situation as I am, and your death. So what are you here for? What do you want? Like, I've already lost everything in part because of you, right? And so I think it kind of tracks narratively in what I think is an interesting way. But again, trust me on this. What if we recognize also, you say, wait a minute, hold on, Nick, this doesn't make any sense. How many relationships are we willing to literally tie someone to a post and try and murder them because they're having that affair? When does that happen? Like, that just doesn't seem to make much sense. Well, there is a circumstance in which it suddenly does start becoming much more likely and common when it's a gay relationship, right? It's an abomination, right? All of a sudden, when the relationship isn't just illicit, but when the relationship is seen as forbidden morally, right? When it's seen as some sort of homosexual relationship and therefore bad in this moral or religious sense, all of a sudden people are willing to do tremendous violence to their children as a result. So I think that there's a very neat metaphor here where there's a clean tracking to that, where you see that she is in a super forbidden relationship with death, i.e., what our society treats as a forbidden relationship, a closeted relationship, a gay relationship. And so, in the same way that people in our society would be like, you've been seeing so and so, they're get you're gay, right? And then all of a sudden, people are doing horrible things to their children as a result. Well, we see a similar situation here. So their problem with her isn't that she's gay, but it's a metaphor, right? It tracks similarly in that reaction. And so why do I think that that is of particular importance? Well, once we realize, like, oh, even if Nick is wrong, and the reason why they are trying to execute her isn't because of her relationship with death, it still ends up being a kind of metaphor for, it's analogous to the experience of the gay population because it's not something that she can control. In other words, if you think that she's being executed because of her power, not because of her relationship, great. I love that reading. But it still makes sense in the metaphor for the experience of the gay community and the hate and the vitriol that they experience, because she can't change who she is, right? She can't change the fact that she has this particular quality about her, and so they're about to execute her for it. I think actually that it's both readings that then add to that, both interpretations that kind of add to that realization. Okay, so we have this mother who's willing to do tremendous harm to her own child um, because of either the way that she was born, like the quality of her that she can't control, or because of a relationship that she's chosen to be in. And to me, one of the cleanest similarities to that, right? That's a clear analogy towards the way many parents will, like, say, kick their child out when they find out that they're gay, which is a kind of infanticidal gesture, right? It's a kind of child murdering. Okay, go out and survive on your own. You don't have a family anymore, right? What is evidence is it to this kind of reading that the narrative is about the gay experience? The fact that Agatha's gay, right? Which in her coven is not a problem, right? Like amongst the witch community is not a problem. But there's something about her that acts as a metaphor towards that. Why does this all matter? Like, is there a reason other than, oh, okay, well, maybe there's kind of like some connections to the experience that gay people have? I think that this matters because of the first reading rule, this first viewing rule that we had initially discussed. That I think that the show is showing us that the people that we think are on the outside are the bad guys, but it's often the people on the inside who are also participating. I think that the show is reminding us that our treatment of the gay population is in no way different from the Salem witch trials. that think about what the Salem witch trials were, right? In our world, the Salem witch trials are finding people who aren't witches, taking members of your own community, just people who are different, right? People who are like you, but they just have some sort of different quality about them, some whatever it is you decide to accuse them for, and then um, tormenting them, torturing them, oppressing them, and then eventually murdering them, right? So it's people on the inside trying to harm other people on the inside. Well, how is it any different from the way that we treat the gay population in our own society, right? They're on the inside, right? They're not outside. They're not aliens, right? The gay population is inside, right? It's us all together. They're not some sort of other form of humanity. And then we, as a society, torment them, ostracize them, cast them out, engage in a form of Salem witch trials for them. And so if Agatha all along is gesturing towards this issue of forbidden loves, relationships that we treat as appalling, relationships that we treat as abominations, the inability of people to change certain qualities about themselves, and yet we decide to torment them and ostracize them and abuse them for that. Those all things stand, I think, as reminders to us that when we're looking and being critical of people who are treating people so poorly, that we really need to look at our own society and ask ourselves, well, wait a minute, am I one of the people who's actually engaging in this behavior? So when I look at it and I go, oh, I was thinking that it was people on the outside trying to kill Agatha, but it was actually witches who were demonizing her and tormenting her and at the end of the day trying to murder her. I tend to think like, oh, it's other people who are going out and doing ostracizing and demonization and so on and so forth. That's not us. That's not our society, right? But what the show is showing us is, well, no, look at the clear analogy. Just like it was people on the outside who were trying to harm Agatha, it was her own community. How are we doing that to members of our own community? Like, for example, our treatment of the gay community. So thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I hope you had some fun talking about it with me. If you disagree, you got something else, because I missed lots of stuff, please post it in the comments. I would love to see it. If you enjoyed it, like, subscribe, and please tell like a couple other people about the show. And I'll talk to you soon. Have a great day.